to what you have to tell us.
Thank you. Hi everyone, so I'm a seabird ecologist and I've had the privilege of going to Aldabra to study the tropic birds. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I've found about the foraging ecology of tropic birds. To start with, this is really not just work I've done on my own. I have many collaborators, most of whom are here today, but also many people, pretty much everybody who was in Aldabra at the time helped out one way or another with the study, so really thanks to everyone. So seabirds are top marine predators, so they're at the top of the marine food chain, and they really good indicators for ocean health. That means if populations of seabirds are doing badly, it gives a good indication that something's going wrong in the marine ecosystem. They're one of the most endangered group of birds on Earth, and numbers globally have been estimated to have decreased by 70% in the last 60 years or so. And they're facing many threats, including on land, especially invasive species, for example, rats that can wipe out seabird colonies really quickly, but also at sea. And top threats at sea will include overfishing, bycatch, that's when birds get caught in fishing gear, but also pollution, that could be plastic pollution, oil spills, and of course, climate change as well. And although some species of seabirds are well studied, a lot of them aren't, and that's especially true for tropical seabirds. We need to learn more about their ecology to understand really what's going on, what's driving population declines, and how we can protect them. Aldabra is a really key site for seabirds in the Western Indian Ocean. These are just a few examples of the many seabird species that you can find on the atoll: frigate birds, boobies, tropic birds, many terns, noddies, and so on. But when I went to Aldabra, I went to look at the tropic birds. So tropic birds are a very key seabird in the Indian Ocean. There's 3 species of tropic birds in the world, and they are in their separate order, the Phythoniformes, and generally their ecology is quite poorly known. And on Aldabra, 2 of these 3 species breed, the white-tailed tropic birds, that you can see here, and the red-tailed tropic birds. Now, white-tailed tropic birds are really far-ranging. You can find them across the Indian Ocean, but also in the Pacific and in the Atlantic. They're fairly small birds, and they'll nest on the rocky islets in the middle of the lagoon on Aldabra, usually in rocky crevices, and they tend to breed all year round. In contrast, the red-tailed tropic birds are a little bit bigger. They've got, as their name indicates, this red tail and red beak as well. You can also find them in the Indian Pacific Ocean. They also nest on the same islets, but they prefer to be on the top under vegetation cover. And unlike the white-tailed tropic birds on Aldabra, they have a peak breeding period from November to February, and that might be because of the need for vegetation to cover their nests. And the aim of this study on Aldabra was, first of all, to fill the big gaps in our knowledge of tropic birds' ecology generally, but also on Aldabra, and understand how they might be using waters around Aldabra. Where are they going to feed, what they're feeding on, and so on. But the second one was also to understand potential differences between these 2 species of tropic birds. First, because Aldabra is one of the few sites where both species coexist, and because they're quite similar, it's interesting to understand how they avoid competing with each other. So it might be that they feed in different places or on different prey, but also because monitoring on Aldabra for the last 10 to 15 years of these tropic birds suggests that the red-tailed tropic bird population is declining and is doing worse than the white-tailed population that seems more stable, and we don't really know why. And so we wanted to investigate whether that was perhaps related to food availability or foraging conditions. So to do this, we decided to go and track the feeding movements of tropic birds when they leave their nest and go out to sea to find food during incubation, and then also when they have a chick and bring fish back for the chick. And so that involved going all around the lagoon and climbing more or less gracefully on these islets to try and find the birds, sometimes on foot, sometimes by boat. You can see here some examples of a red-tailed and a white-tailed tropic bird's nest on these islets. And to track their movements, we used these really, really tiny GPS loggers weighing only a few grams that we attached onto their tails. And these were measuring the location of the birds for every 5 to 10 minutes for about a week, and then the birds returned to their nest, and we would take the devices off, and we could download the data to see where they'd been. And here are some examples of a white-tailed tropic bird and a red-tailed tropic birds with the tags attached on their tails. And in total, we managed to record 50 to 60 trips from these 2 species, from 18 red-tailed and 12 white-tailed tropic birds. Now, we also wanted to know what they were eating and if there were any differences in diet. So every time they vomited on us or pooped on us, we collected these samples to try and analyze what they'd eaten. And with the fecal samples, the idea was to use DNA metabocoding. So that's basically extracting the DNA from the fecal samples and then sequencing it so that we can identify the different prey and we can work out what they've eaten. And finally, we put some camera traps near these nests to monitor to estimate the breeding success. Now, during the study, which was basically from January to March 2019, we found that the breeding success of the red-tailed tropic bird was appalling. It was less than 5%, and a little bit better, 10.5% for the white-tailed tropic birds. And actually, the year-long monitoring on Aldabra that year shows the reverse trend where the red-tailed are doing slightly better. And there might be a whole lot of reasons for this, and I'm not going to go into them now. But the key message here is really low breeding success either way. These birds are not really being successful at raising chicks. And so when we tracked these red-tailed and white-tailed tropic birds, this is what we found. So on this map, you see a red blob, which is the distribution of the red-tailed tropic birds, and a white one, which is where the white-tailed tropic birds went. The transparent ones are the whole distributions, and then the opaque ones are the core areas, the top 50% of where the birds are going to feed. And the first thing that was amazing is to realize how far from Aldabra these birds were going. They're covering huge distances to go and feed both species. But also what's really clear from this is that they're going to completely different places. If you look at the overlap between these distributions, if you compare the whole distributions, there's less than 5% overlap, and it's all happening near the colony. And then if you look at the core feeding areas, there's no overlap at all. So they're completely spatially segregated, and that might be how they avoid competing with each other. We also found some differences in their foraging behavior. So in general, red-tailed tropic birds went much further than white-tailed tropic birds. So for example, during incubation, on average, they'd go nearly 400 kilometers away from the colony versus about 250 for white-tailed tropic birds. And this decreased for chick rearing because they need to feed the chick more often, but still the red-tails were going further. And similarly, if we look at the total trip distance that they were covering or the duration of the trips, we found similar patterns. The red-tailed tropic birds on incubation were going for over 6 days away, covering over 1,100 kilometers, and this was much longer than what the white-tailed tropic birds were doing. And same thing during chick rearing, shorter trips, but still longer for the red-tails. And then we looked at the sort of environmental conditions at the places where they were feeding. And again, we found some differences. Red-tailed tropic birds tend to feed in deeper waters, which are also a bit warmer. And especially during incubation, these waters are more productive. The diet studies wasn't as successful because we just didn't have that many samples that we could identify, and a lot of the samples didn't yield enough DNA to identify. So this is quite a coarse picture, but basically we found some overlap in the diet of the two species. Both of them are eating a lot of flying fish, for example, and also half-beak species were in both species' diet, but there's also, for example, dolphin fish that was really present in red-tailed tropic birds, but not in the white-tailed tropic birds. And if we look at these huge distribution, these huge trips that the birds are going to feed, we can see that they're going far beyond protected areas around Aldabra and even beyond the Seychelles EEZ. These birds are really wide-ranging, and for them, borders don't mean anything. And so this really has implications for their conservation. So to conclude, we've learned that red-tailed tropic birds on Aldabra feed a lot further than white-tailed tropic birds, and the two species are really highly spatially segregated, even though their diet overlaps quite a bit. But we found no really strong conclusive evidence that the slow breeding success and declines of red-tailed tropic birds is linked to food availability, because in fact the red-tailed tropic birds, they were going a bit further, but they were going to waters which were actually slightly more productive, and there was no evidence that they were struggling. In fact, the hatching success of red-tailed tropic birds was higher than that of the white-tails during the study. So there might be other explanations for these declines. It might be poor adult survival, it might be nest predation, so this is something that we'll be looking at next. And then we found that both tropic bird species on Aldabra are feeding really far away in pelagic areas, really far from Aldabra, beyond protected areas and beyond the Seychelles Economic Zone. And I think this really highlights the importance of international collaborations when we are wanting to protect these wide-ranging marine species, because these birds are going into other countries' waters, and probably tropic birds from other countries are also wide-ranging and coming into Seychelles areas. So I think this is a really important result from this study. I just want to thank you very much, and maybe I can answer some questions at the end. Thank you.